on Fenestration Canada's NAFS calculator tool and the new labeling guidelines document that Fenestration Canada has put together last fall. So I want to walk through. The presentation is going to just an outline. We'll review the new guideline document on labeling and what's available in that document. This is a document Fenestration Canada is making available on the public side of their website. It'll be available to the entire industry, specifiers, building officials, looking at the sort of a best practice guide for what needs to be on labels to properly prove compliance with NAFS and the building code. Then in the second half of the presentation today, we'll review and do a demonstration of the web calculation tool. And this is how you will come up with the performance grade and the performance requirements for fenestration products geographically across the country. So I think I'd like to get started, and we'll just keep moving on here. So the NAFS guide, the NAFS labeling guideline document. This document looks at the labeling requirements that are spelled out in both NAFS and the Canadian supplement to NAFS A440S109. We've gone through these, taken a look at all of the requirements with the help of folks from right across Canada and some participation with some U.S. folks as well through Fenestration Canada. And big thanks go out to Al Ugelis with Fenestration BC for spearheading a lot of this work, and we appreciate his efforts with working with us on this. So there's 10 guidelines are presented to help manufacturers comply with the labeling requirements here, to walk you through and make recommendations on best practices for labeling. While none of these are mandatory requirements, they're the industry's effort on coming up with a best practice guide for labeling. What I'd like to do now is just work our way through them. So guideline number 1 says the performance rating labels shall include both the primary and secondary designator and shall follow the NAFS 08 rules for use of the secondary designator. What this is incorporating here is this guideline is making it known that NAFS spells out, if you use the secondary designator, how it has to look. And then the Canadian supplement says, in Canada, you shall use the secondary designator, where in the NAFS document, it's optional. So it's very important to understand that for Canadian labeling, in the U.S., for example, just complying with NAFS, the first 2 lines would be sufficient. But in Canada, we require the additional 2 lines here to spell out the requirements, and what's required there. So the document goes in and outlines and explains that. Guideline number 2 says the performance rating shall be identify both the standards that the building code requires product to conform to, meaning the NAFS 2008 document and the CSA A440S109 document. So that you need to spell out on the label that that you're meeting the requirements of both those documents, as they are both referenced in the building code. Guideline number 3 then says the performance rating labels shall state that the product conforms to those 2 things. So it's identifying the standards and then makes a statement that it conforms to those requirements. And we'll take a look at some of that. The details, there's more text in the standard, or sorry, in this guideline document about all of this, but I want to hit the highlights here. The performance rating shall include a manufacturer's identification by name or traceable certification mark, product line series, and may at the manufacturer's discretion include the operator type. Again, this is all recommended information that is required by NAFS. Guideline number 3, the performance rating information shall be enclosed within a single line box border to separate it and distinguish it from other ratings or labels on the fenestration product. When I get to the examples of what we say the label should look like, what you'll see is that there's a box around all of the NAFS and the Canadian supplement information. That's a recommendation, again, coming forward. Oops. Guideline number 6 says the secondary designator shall report the pressure values in metric units and pascals, and may also include the inch-pound units on the pressure values. The performance ratings are encouraged to be used in the IP performance grade designations. And again, when I come to the labels, I'll explain what that means. In the NAFS standard, the performance grade designations can be in both inch-pounds and metric. Through Fenestration Canada, the industry's looked at this and come back and said the confusion that is entered by having 2 different sets of performance grades causes a lot of problems. In fact, CSA committee has made recommendation that we go back to NAFS, and in future versions of NAFS, drop the metric numbers and treat the performance grade as a ranking of product. And I'll show you what that means when we get to the labels here in just a second. Well, in fact, let me just back up to that. A performance grade 30 versus a metric of 1440 can cause some confusion in the labeling. So we're making recommendation that manufacturers work with this. This would still be within the rules of NAFS right now, but if you do that, you have to put the word metric in here. So we're recommending that you keep to the performance grade 30 or whatever the performance grade may be, and that everything over here is in metric inches or in optional in inch-pound units. So this shows some of the abbreviations of the primary designator and what's allowed in NAFS, and how it may be shortened up and cleaned up to do this. Highly recommend, for example, in this example where it just shows it in inches, everything in metric on the label will make your life a whole lot easier as a manufacturer for complying with the code, as the code is written in metric. Guideline number 9, that is performance rating labels should include premature removal caution. So a statement that says do not remove until the building has been inspected, or something to that effect. Quite critical, because if those temporary labels that show the performance values are removed by a builder's cleaning crew before final inspection, the window may not be, the final occupancy permit could be delayed while proof of compliance of the windows is there. So just adding to your label a statement that says do not remove until inspected is a very good idea. Then finally, Guideline 10 clarifies that we talk about this, and these labels I'm going to show you as examples are intended to be temporary labels that are non-permanent and can be removed, but that does not mean you could not include all the performance data on a permanent label should you so choose, and that is an option. So let me walk through a few of the examples now in this. So example number 1 shows how the products are rated for more than one standard. So that if you're trying to show conformance to NAFS and the CSA, or the Canadian supplement to NAFS, also showing the CSA A440, the older document, or possibly you show NAFS here and the supplement in multiple lines. All of this can be done as long as you're being very clear that this is the NAFS requirements, here's the performance grade and information there, here's the supplement with the design pressure, water pressure, and the air infiltration information. Also real important in Canada, the Canadian supplement requires that you do infiltration and exfiltration and identify that as well. The test has to include both. Take another look at another example where manufacturer's name or identity is indicated elsewhere on the performance rating, so that this is just showing conformance to NAFS and the supplement. Here's the performance ratings, and it's all there, or a simplified version of that, where the name of the manufacturer is identified. So if this was in a box attached to a label, that a good example might be your NFRC label. Has the name of the manufacturer, all of that information, and this is being added on to that same part of the label. That's a possibility. Another one. Yeah. Yes?
Question. Can a label be applied in the field?
No. It's unclear. Could it be done? You would run into a lot of questions on that. From the energy certification program, no, you can't. Really, the label should be applied on the product as it's leaving the manufacturing facility. That's the ideal answer to the question. Can it be done in the field? That would ultimately become up to the local building official whether they will accept that or not. Any other questions at this point, Robert?
No, and I see that Al Yogalis is also adding support to what you just said as well.
Okay. Ideally, you want this going on your product as it leaves the manufacturing facility, and that there's no ambiguity in the field of, well, it should have had this label on it. Now, if you run into that, then it becomes an issue of will the local building official accept that, is what it comes down to. Okay, so example number 3 shows single product labels related to NAFS, own NAFS as well. So that this is showing defines the manufacturer's name and the line of the product, all the information that's required in terms of the performance grade, design pressure, water and air infiltration, and says conforms to. And there's just various different versions of these. Any of these would be acceptable as long as they're showing all the required information here. Let me get over here. So what did I do? Example number 3, was that it? Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the guideline document is available on the Fenestration Canada website. I'm hoping to get there at the end of the presentation, just do a live demo of the tool, and I can show you where this document is now available on the website. And again, it's on the public site, available to all.
Jeff?
So, yep.
Got a question for you. Can you go back a couple of slides? Okay, this one. Is one of these can be applied or edited at the bottom of an Energy Star NFRC label, if it's squared like that?
That was the intent, that this one is being added to another label or part of another label, so that the manufacturer's identity and other things are on the label, but this is just added to an Energy Star label or an NFRC label, added to that same label. Keeping in mind that, keeping in mind that, like for an NFRC example, it has to be added to the label but not attached to the box of the NFRC label. But it has to appear on the same physical label.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff, one more question here. I'm not sure if it's been answered. It's what about SHD with labeling?
Side hinged entry doors. All the same labeling requirements apply to side hinged entry doors. So it needs to have the permanent identification of the manufacturer has to appear on the permanent labeling requirements are that you permanently identify the manufacturer of that product. In most cases, that's going to be the pre-hanger. And then a temporary label can show up to identify the performance requirements. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Robert?
Supplementary. What about site installed door locks?
There's a lot of issues going on right now about door locks and that. That's going to, there's some issues being brought forward through the Joint Document Management Group of NAFS to try and clarify what we can do with door locking hardware and how that's tested. I haven't got any good answers on that today.
And there's another question here. Is a permanent label required?
Yes, but the minimum requirement for permanent marking on the product is the identification of the manufacturer. That's it. Now, would a permanent label from a certification program, would an NFRC label that the permanent label of an NFRC certification program identifies the manufacturer, even if their name's not there, there's a number that's traceable back to that manufacturer. That would comply for permanently identifying the name of the manufacturer. So if you had an NFRC permanent label, while it doesn't have anything to do with NAFS, permanently identifies the manufacturer, and then if you add to your temporary NFRC label the NAFS information, you're in compliance with the building code at that point in time. Before I move on to the calculator, any other questions?
There was a question here about do these labels show that the product is certified?
No. The building code does not require that the product is certified. Okay? The building code requires that the product is tested in accordance with NAFS and the Canadian Supplement and labeled to identify that it conforms to those documents. If you are in a certification program and you include the certification mark of the organization you're certifying with and include all of this information, you're one step ahead. when building officials see a certified product, they'll become aware that that product is also being inspected by the certification organization at the plant to make sure it's being built as tested. So it adds to it, but that is not required by code. So if you're in a certification program and you're labeling it in compliance with all of this information, you're one step ahead of what the code requires.
I think that's all I see at this point.
Okay, I'll come back to and show where that document, the full document, is available. I highly encourage everybody to get a copy, read through it, and go through all the information that's available in there. You will find it valuable in helping make sure your labels are going to comply with the building code and NAFS and the supplement. Next step then, I want to talk about the Fenestration Performance Calculator that's been added to the Fenestration Canada website. If you go to fenestrationcanada.ca, you'll find this button on the main page. By clicking that button, you're going to jump into the calculator that has 279 locations right across Canada, available height of windows above the ground, from 10 meters to 100 meters and 5-meter step sizes. Talks about open and rough terrain, which is covered in the building code and the Canadian supplement. And then it works for buildings on level surfaces. Buildings on sloping surfaces require a more detailed calculation, and you would need to go to the Canadian supplement, and it would point you in the right direction for that. So all of this work is making the assumption you are on a level surface. The building is on a level surface. So let me take an example here. Once you click that button from the main site, you'll end up on the calculator page. Shows you all the information. It's got the disclaimer and some definitions on the bottom. But basically, you begin by selecting the province you're in. Then you can go look up the city you're in, looking for in particular. Select your height. Select the terrain. Once you've done that, it will report back the minimum performance grade, positive and negative design pressures, the minimum water pressure required, and the, well, this one defaults because in the code, A2 is the minimum air leakage requirement. An A3 or a fixed rating would exceed the A2, so that's the minimum requirement, but we added it in so that it does show up. Then there's an area, there's a notes area, that if you want to add some notes on the project you're looking up and the numbers you're calculating, you can put some notes in here. Then when you go to print it out, those notes will appear on the printed sheet as well. So, as an example, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see just all of the performance or the information that we've got to enter. And I'll show you that I picked Fenestration, which happens to be where I live in Ontario, a height of 10 meters, and a rough terrain. Looking at all of that, it reports back that the minimum performance grade is 20. The minimum positive and negative design pressures would be 960 pascals, and the minimum water pressure required is 180 pascals. So that gives it to you. So you can run through these calculations at various heights, open or rough terrain, and 679 locations across Canada. Then there is an option to print this out, and if you've got the ability to print to a PDF on your computer, it can go straight to a PDF. And there are ways to work this from mobile devices as well. The layout works really well on smartphones, tablets, and does a good job there as well.
A question, Jeff?
Yeah.
Can the minimum water requirement exceed the PG?
Yes. That was an excellent question. So the way the building code works is we determine what the positive or negative design pressure required. That will usually define your performance grade. It's not very often that, well, it comes down to the performance grade is defined by the design pressure. If you were, so we have set this up to calculate the minimum performance grade required. Now, if the driving rain wind pressure in that location requires a water pressure greater than that performance grade, then you have the option when testing to test to a higher water. So it is possible we would show a performance grade at this level and a higher water pressure here be required in that zone. That doesn't mean now that if I went to the higher performance grade to get the water requirement, then that would also increase my design pressure. That product would also comply. But what we're looking for is what is the minimum code requirement. The minimum code requirement is usually based on the performance, design pressure for that location. And then if the water pressure is required to be larger, we'll show that here to show you what the requirement is. Bottom line, if we go back to the labeling requirements, let me skip back to the labeling requirements. The design pressure and the water pressure are on the label. The building official will be able to use those to determine that if they know for the town of Penetanguishene, 960 and 180 will do the job, they'll be able to find that information directly on the label to look for compliance.
Another question, Jeff? Yeah,
Robert,
can the calculator be called by other software, example as a web service?
you're beyond my technical IT capabilities. I'm not sure about that. Any other questions at this point? Okay, I'm going to risk it and try opening this and just showing it to you live here. So let me jump out of here and go into let me do this and come at it from the right direction here.
Yeah, Jeff, the proponent from the last question suggests that perhaps this can be discussed by email after the session.
Please, email it to me, and if you can help me understand exactly what you're looking for, I would be happy to do that. I ended up in the wrong place. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, here's the main page when you come in to the Fenestration Canada website right now. You'll see the calculators right here in the upper right corner. I just want to mention here, if you click and you go to the Fenestration Canada labeling guideline on the main page here, if you jump in there, let me do that right now, you will be able to, and if you click where it's lit up and says here, you will get to a point where you can download and get a copy of that document. So there's the document available. Now hopefully I can back out of this a couple of pages. There we go. So right from the main page you can gain access to the labeling guideline document. Now on the main page again you can go into the calculator tool. It jumps out to a separate page that does the calculations. And again you can select provinces. So I'm just randomly going to grab Nova Scotia. I'll take Dartmouth as my location. In this case, I'm going to just change that to 20 meters above ground and say it's for open terrain. Once I've defined all 4 variables, you'll get the calculation showing up over here and telling you what the performance requirements. You can see at performance grade of 45, water pressure of 440. If I took that back down to a 10-meter height, it dropped from 45 to 44 and 440 to 400 on the water pressure. So, and if I switch from open to rough terrain, you'll see they'll reduce again in rough terrain. So, tools out there now. It's been available for a little while to look up, and again, there's 679 locations right across the country available.
Jeff, can you just quickly review the disclaimer provision and the print function?
Yep. So if we look at the print function, when I come out to the print function, this is now a printable page. And basically it's saying nothing on this site consists of legal advice. These calculations are presented as general guidance and technical information from Fenestration, a nonprofit organization. Review CSA A440S109 to confirm your calculations. Consult a lawyer, accountant, or insurance professional before making any of these decisions. So it's a disclaimer to say we put it out there, we're making it available, but ultimately this information is out there for the use of the industry, building officials, specifiers to verify what's required. All of these calculations are spelled out in the Canadian supplement, the A440S1. We've just tried to make them more usable at this point in time. Now, will that get me back? Yep, there we go. This point in time, I encourage you to get a copy of the labeling guideline document, look it over, and to better understand what the requirements are to put on the label, and then have a look at the performance tool if you're looking for it to make that available. Again, both of these are on the public side of the Fenestration Canada website. Our efforts out there to help keep the playing field in the industry level by making this information available to all concerned. Robert, have you got any more questions for me?
Just on another note, we have recorded this session, so we anticipate being able to upload that to a location where you can access it from the archives for further reference and information.
Well, if there's any more questions, please feel free. I had...
Jeff, there's one more question here. Is, do you believe code officials will accept the printout from the calculator?
I would hope so. That if there's any discrepancy about what the requirement is in a jurisdiction, the building code makes it clear. You go to the Canadian supplement and do the calculations there. This tool's been set up to follow those calculations. The only place you could get into any discrepancy with these results is if the building's on a sloping surface. Then you really do need to go back to the supplement and follow some instructions on where to look in the code to do the calculations. But you know, this is an effort to make it an industry tool available so that if you run into problems, because what, you know, if you've got a printout from this calculator and there's any questions about it, the building official can go back and redo the calculations themselves, or go into the Canadian supplement and do the calculations from there. It's going into the supplement and doing one or two calculations isn't that big a deal. If I had to go in and do thousands of them, it's a lot of work. The goal here was to computerize them so they're available, so that it's very easy to grab them. But if a building official wanted to check and take one calculation and go into the supplement and verify it, very easy to do that. I don't know if they want to verify every one, but I'm hoping it is a tool that building officials will find some use in. But once they know, if I'm the building official in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and I've looked it up and said, you know, I typically deal with Part 9 residential buildings, that's all under 10 meters in height, then I need to know two things. The open is 40 and the rough is 25, and the matching water ratings. Once I've got that information, that's the numbers that need to be on the labels in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Now, if it's a commercial building going up higher, you know, then I can come back and say, well, you know, at 30 meters in height now, here's the new performance requirements. So that information is readily available.
Jeff, there was a question or a comment, labeling guidelines for multiple sections.
The labeling guidelines document was set up to look at single units now. We plan on continuing on working on that document to add to it on proper labeling for multi-units, whether they're combination windows of two boxes mulled together, or composite windows where you've got a common frame with integral mullions and multiple units within one common frame. That is the next step that the task group that wrote that document plans to work on.
Next question, can a window have an A rating lower than A3 and still conform to NAFS?
Just to be clear, A2 is the minimum requirement. A3 would be higher than required by code. So A2 is the minimum as written in the NAFS document that is code compliant. You can't be less than A2. But then again, if you tested your window and you didn't achieve an A2, then you didn't conform to the NAFS document to begin with. So all windows that are tested have to meet an A2. If they meet the A3 or fixed rating, then they've exceeded A2.
Next question, who is responsible to determine the PG required for the home to meet code?
That's a good question. Whoever is installing that product on site is the responsible party that needs to make sure the product they're installing is in compliance with the building code. But I believe that a lot of builders and others will push that back on the window manufacturer, and the spec will say, please supply a code-compliant product. So for residential Part 9 buildings, as an example, knowing that you need certain requirements in the jurisdiction you're selling into will be quite important. And knowing what's going to be required in the region you want to sell your products, incredibly important, because I believe the requirement will get pushed back on you to make sure you're supplying product to them that will comply with code.
There is a note here from Aljo Galis saying for sloping terrain, you need an engineer trained technologist to do the calcs, not
Yes.
for the faint of heart.
I would agree with Al. Not for the faint of heart on sloping surfaces.
Another question, is there a grace period for labeling assembled windows?
I can't really answer that question. That's going to be a complicated issue going on jurisdiction by jurisdiction where NAFS is already in play. Places like Ontario, BC, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, who did I miss? Others. Right now, NAFS is in all provinces except Alberta and Quebec, I believe. That as of the first of the year, that statement is true, I believe. But certainly BC, Ontario, Manitoba, Nova Scotia are all, Saskatchewan for sure, New Brunswick and Newfoundland, not sure what's going on out there. PEI.
There was a comment, same question for door hardware grace period.
That's going to be, again, a jurisdiction by jurisdiction situation right now until we move forward. We're trying to get some information out there that the industry can promote, and I'm hoping there will be some flexibility on that as we move forward.
Does the PG required increase if a door is within 3 feet of the corner of the building?
That's a very detailed question.
Yeah, now Alice said no.
Al said no? Thank you,
Yeah.
Al.
Okay. And then also there are no exemptions or delays for mulled products and no door hardware grace period, it would appear.
Is that what Al has said?
Yeah, that's coming from Al.
Yeah, and that is definitely what's happening in BC right now. So it's a very difficult scenario right now on those issues.
That seems to be it at this point, Jeff.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation today. And certainly if there's questions that come up on this, don't hesitate to contact Fenestration Canada on these. We'll do our best to help out, but we're trying to help educate right across the country on these code requirements.